Conley umbrella. The Endeavor component of that is frankly separate and almost irrelevant. Endeavor just simply provides a management service to the hospital. So it's as long as the hospital board maintains that relationship, it's really an integration into the Conley Wilson County Memorial Hospital District organization managed by Endeavor Healthcare. So that's how that would work. To me, the best method would be to consolidate each of the services under that umbrella.
And you covered the second question, the next question. I'm just going to skip to you though. And so I think you answered several of those. So Endeavor wouldn't be involved in the day-to-day operations, but Conley Memorial would. How many? Just
again, just to be clear on that, Endeavor is the management organization of the hospital hired by the board. I'm an Endeavor employee and responsible to the local board, and I am responsible for day-to-day operations of the hospital and strategic vision of the hospital.
Okay. Okay. How many stations does your plan include for Wilson County, and where would they be positioned? Do you know that yet?
You know, the short answer to that is at this point there are 4 stations. So certainly we know that there will continue to be 4 stations. I mean that's our short answer. We have had some very interesting conversations with the city of Poth. They have been very interested and proactive in this project, and that community is embracing the idea of providing some additional services to the southern quarter of the county. That's still obviously under review and development, but the short answer is at least 4 stations.
Okay. How many ambulances would be at each station? 1 or 2 like we have now?
Same as you guys have.
2 at each one? And will there be at least 1 paramedic at each station on all the shifts and on every 911 run?
The answer to that is yes, we will do what needs to happen in order to maintain MICU coverage 24/7, 365. Which would be
so
that.
Yes. Okay. Well, let's see. What is Conley, these are mine and others, but what is Conley planning to do to cover citizens during the transition period as the glitches are being worked out? We just don't want the level of service to, we can't afford for the level of service to drop.
Well, and I mean, actually, that's such a great point, because here in ESD3, you have the highest level of service. In the other areas, we will definitely be going to a different level of service, and we'll have to have some time to make that happen. But in terms of managing through the transitions and glitches, to me, that's just teamwork, right? I mean, we're not attempting to try to say we are the experts in ESD services. You all have been, right? You all have been. So we'll need to work with each of the services in order to handle any glitches that are going to come. Probably the biggest thing will be as we start to hire individuals, that will really help us be able to know how our transition plan can best be done with the existing services.
And you said as teamwork, how long do you, I know there's no definite answer to this, but how long do you anticipate we might still be in operation after October 17th, for instance?
Well,
I can answer that one, Brian.
Okay.
It's going to be up to, once, whether they take over, when they take over, the people have to petition us to close.
Okay.
The hospital board, the hospital district has nothing to do with us staying on or going away. It's our people that we serve now, this ESD3.
Okay.
They would have to petition us. We would have to have a vote then.
And so as long as, so as long as we have to operate, we'll have to continue at least our current tax level.
Well, we would have, it would be on, we'd have to figure out about, budget every year and figure out what it's going to cost us to stay in operation. Yes, they would be double taxed for some time,
Okay. That was my next question, so I covered that. And Carlos answered the next one about what if the current ESDs aren't dissolved, people would just be done with tax. And then
I think there may be a difference though between dissolving the ESD, that may not be a necessary step, and dramatically reducing the tax rate to meet your needs of making sure that good services are provided in cooperation with us. I mean,
Right,
there
I mean,
really can be a good balance there. I think.
The deal is, we still run this district.
Right.
Whether we hire, we keep our ambulances the way they are now, or if we were to bring in private or whatever, or we would have a contract with y'all, with the hospital district, until it's finally dissolved or whatever goes away. If the citizens still want it as a checks and balance and say, okay, for the next year or 2 years, they want to make sure that we're getting this quality of care that we've moved up to, they could say, well, we want the board to stay on.
You bet. I don't disagree with that at all.
Other than, like I said, we'd probably lower our tax rate to just a minimum what it costs to operate.
Okay, the next one is, what is the proposed starting pay for entry-level EMTs?
I'm just going to answer that question very directly. We're going to be competitive in our wage. We've certainly seen wages from. There's a wide range out there. We've seen ranges from $13 to $19 and even a little bit more. So we're going to be in a competitive balance.
What's in your budget that you prepared?
The budget amount, I think, is $18 an hour or something
For
like that.
EMTs or paramedics?
For paramedics.
What about EMTs?
I can't remember specifically off the top of my
We
head.
heard $12.
Okay.
And so,
That's
the
an
question-
average rate.
The question I have is how, because we do have a problem attracting people to Wilson County from other areas because we don't have enough qualified paramedics and EMTs. We have some awesome ones, but not enough to cover us. So, and I don't know I don't remember exactly what we pay, but how will we attract them at $12 an hour?
Well, I guess the
Basics
whole
is
point
average.
is we're gonna have to do whatever needs to be done to make sure that the services are available. Wages are always a very dynamic item, and we're gonna have to hire a number of people relatively quickly. So, we're gonna be competitive in that regard.
Okay. Question is whether Conlon Memorial is looking, or Endeavor looking at taking over the 911 services in the future? Is any talk anything about that?
No, really, we believe that's a county thing. That's not an area that we're interested in on the surface. Just in general, that's certainly something that has a broader issue than just healthcare. So we have not discussed that. Other than I did offer. I know that the county provides certain amount of, I guess, about $100,000 and some odd of support to each of the EMS services in total. Offered to Judge when that's no longer needed, there may be a good discussion around some communication equipment or something along those lines to help improve that service.
Okay. Please don't have to give specific answers, so I'm going to skip them in the interest of time, but I might go on talking to somebody.
Anytime, Jimmy.
The other one, each existing ESD will incur or may already have incurred extraordinary expenses that we can't afford. None of us have the money for attorney fees, accounting fees, and things. And I think I've asked you this before, and you didn't know yet, but would we be reimbursed? It would burden us.
I think that's probably, as this whole project evolves, for each of the different services, the needs are going to be different, right? The needs are going to be different. And I think once we break through this initial discussion of what's happening here and can actually get specific by service, what those needs are, we can definitely. There's transaction costs with any transaction, so we just need to understand what those are. That's not necessarily an offer to say yes. It's just we need to understand what those transactional costs are.
Okay, and back to the thing, and we won't have to discuss it a lot, but I understand, and you can just say yes or no, that no feasibility study was performed before this endeavor was taken on by an outside counsel, which is usually required by bank, and a strategic plan, usually required by banks and, others that are going into such a project. But that the members of your board, as they explained, just assess this amongst themselves. So, and I would like to know, and I don't know if you can tell me right now, or we could just get it in writing at some point I could share, what are the qualifications of those board members to make such a feasibility assessment for Wilson County? And did they take into account, I know that there's one in Weatherford and using Mr. Paul Smith for the implementation. Did they take into account the fact that Wilson County, we don't collect very much of what we bill for our patients as patients? I don't know, David could tell us about the percentage, but I don't think we quite compare to Weatherford.
Yeah, no, I'm going to answer that question directly. I think it really depends on your definition of a feasibility study. Was there an outside consultant hired prior to Paul Smith to review this? No, not as a hired consultant. However, both myself and Endeavor shared the concept with other EMS leaders around the state and received good guidance in that regard. Our budget was reviewed by an outside source. Where the hospital board came to the conclusion was based on our dramatically improved financial performance, our expertise in billing and collections, but most importantly, our long-term focus on providing health care across the region, across Wilson County. Those items are what drove us to the idea that this is affordable, it is manageable, and we felt qualified to lead that. In one of my previous hospitals, I had an EMS service that operated. It operated well. It's just a management item of a healthcare executive. So it falls under our purview.
And that county that you managed, was it similar to Wilson County?
Yes.
Or was it, nobody's like Wilson County quite, are they? With our population and where was that?
I was in Wayne County, Iowa.
One county. I have other questions, but I don't want to take forever, and I think I've covered, the budget, is that available to the public?
Sure.
The $800,000 a year, what you plan to do?
Sure.
And,
And actually, just so you know, I've done my homework, right? Each of your organizations, or many of your organizations, have financial statements available. I mean, you were very gracious in openly sharing them. Each of the other services have IRS Form 990s that are public available. So we were able to do some research and figure out what expenditures were being made, what revenues were being obtained. And we were able to put that into a reasonable approximation of what a countywide service would come. The budget and the current financials that you all provided served as a great model because you already are providing the highest level of service, and it really helped us to sort out our expense side. You know, the revenue side's a little bit more tricky at this point, but certainly you gave us a good guidance on the expense component of this.
okay. So Carlos, do you want to open up for public comment?
Does anybody have any more?
On the board?
One of the concerns that we have is we have some long-term debt with the tax revenues securing that debt. So we have to work out that starting in October of 17.
Right.
Type of deal.
And that's debt on ambulances.
It's a debt on ambulances and a lease.
Monitor.
On the monitor, on a couple of monitors.
I mean, they're upgraded, they're 15, so, I mean, everything's new.
Right, so I think that, again, once we kind of break through this initial phase of reaction to this, the right thing to do is go transaction by transaction with you all, with ESD2, with the other services, and sort out just exactly where some of where some of the issues like that are, and how they can be best be
I
addressed.
mean, how we handle that is gonna impact what our tax rate would be
You bet.
post October 17th.
Right. Well, and again, if those, I'm just thinking generically, if those assets are something that we would want to obtain or need for our service, you know, there's certainly transactions that can make sense in that regard.
And along that same line, if we if you don't utilize one of these stations and we, as an ESD has to sell, maybe the judge has to sell off, what happens with the money from the sale, and what if we have to liquidate? What happens with the monies from that? Somebody mentioned that also.
But
What,
if we were to liquidate,
if we,
we'd have to follow whatever the rules that state on our, something we'd have to look up, talk to lawyers about.
okay.
Roger, you got, Race, you got any?
All my concern was always the personnel. I know you're gonna give them all an opportunity to do that. I think we put a awful good, I didn't do it, other people have done it, put a good personnel together, which is not easy to do. And that's long, as long as they're gonna be given an opportunity to move on, I'm happy.
I guess, again, I want to come back to be on record with that point also. I've stated from the very beginning that the folks who are providing the service, you know, given their qualifications, given their experience, et cetera, they're the folks who are best positioned to take care of Wilson County residents. They know them, they're their neighbors, they're their
And
friends.
you answered that question in the very first one.
Right.
Statement,
So that's kind of where I stand on that.
Anybody in the public, in the audience, have any questions, comments? Paul?
So you're stating, and I'm asking clarification, you're stating 2 units at 4 stations minimum, and they're always gonna have a paramedic to every call?
I'm making sure, what I'm saying is that there will be a paramedic and a EMT or, you know, another personnel able to make sure that we have MICU licensure level 24 hours a day. How the second rig is staffed, you know, that still has to be determined, right? That still has to be determined. But we will make sure that we are able to qualify as MICU 24/7, 365.
For every call?
For every call. That is the plan.
So
That's what you all are able to do. You've
So that
been
would
able to
require a
achieve that.
paramedic on the second truck?
No, he's saying that the second truck would be kind of like it is now. We all staff a primary truck already.
Right, so that would be not every call.
Well, at my, sorry if I'm,
I'll let you guys jump in on
Right.
that.
well,
That would be not
I mean,
every
I
call.
think 4 stations, all right, and you have a paramedic at each of the stations, and the second ambulance is yes, it's a backup, it's a reserve, whatever. I know where you're going with that.
So 8 units is what I'm saying, 16 personnel across the county?
Well, that's kind of where I was going, trying to, again, if I'm,
Go
that's
ahead,
not your
Dave,
vision,
I'm
okay,
following.
but I understand what you're saying, thinking of it as a backup call, somebody coming in and staffing it. What I'm saying is it'd be like that unit responding to take that call if this unit's out of the area.
Yeah.
Like a backfill.
No, that's not what the lady asked. The lady asked, forgive me if I'm mistaken, the lady asked, how many stations there would be? The answer was 4. The lady asked, how many units at each station? The answer would be 2. The answer was 2, so that's 8 units. So what I'm asking is, are we gonna get paramedics on 8 units across the county to ensure that we always have paramedics on every single call? I'm asking, is that true, or are we gonna go back up with a BLS unit, 4 and 4? What's your structure of those 8 units, or is it not gonna be 8 units?
It's going to be a rig with a backup at each station, as it is now. That's how you staff,
So, okay,
right?
so we're gonna have 8 ambulances.
And that's how you staff, right?
Okay,
And then, in all seriousness and honesty and directness, the backup component is exactly one of the best opportunities for cooperation amongst the 4 services, period. So I would say that rather than me suggesting it's going to be this way or that way, the backup units is exactly the area where we have the best opportunity to figure out what's going to make the most sense across the county. Because, you know, we need to have a good sense together of how many times is that backup unit called out? where is it typically called up? I know that across the county, there's typically about 10 runs a day. So how does that develop out? Those are questions that I think still need to be studied with the EMS director and with each of you to figure out just exactly what happens on the backup units. I'm committed to the idea that we're going to have MICU coverage for every call.
Right, because I'm just concerned, I mean, we staff 8 MIC units across this county, that'd be phenomenal, that'd be great, that'd be great. I'm just concerned, the related cost to do that we don't, you know.
The backup units are definitely an area that needs to be coordinated amongst everybody. I mean, that's clear.
Y'all didn't factor that
That's
into
clear.
your budget?
We did, Paul.
Okay,
We did.
okay.
I'm thinking, probably the way you're gonna start, personally, is that you're gonna have one paramedic truck, one MICU truck in every area. Yeah, you'll have 2 trucks there. You also have a supervisor, which is your director. You probably have him a vehicle that'll roam. If a call comes out of Stockdale and Stockdale area, a second call comes out of Stockdale area, most likely they're gonna send the MIC unit for the second call out of Lavernia. You probably ain't gonna be able to afford right off the, until you look at everything. It's like any business, you set a plan and then you make adjustments. So that's my vision, is that you're gonna see that second paramedic truck come out of Lavernia. If there's a third call in Lavernia, then you'd probably send it from Eagle Creek.
So the budget has a staffing plan with it?
Yes,
Okay, can we get an email on that?
I'll make sure the board gets that, sure.
I mean, everybody, all your stakeholders across the county, since it's countywide, could we all get an email to get the staffing plan?
I'm not sure
and
that I
the
have
budget?
everyone across the county's email address. We'll definitely make sure that this public board.
Well, yeah, y'all
we'll
sent
make sure
us,
that gets-
y'all already sent us information, you should have it.
Sir?
You can finish the public. I got a call today from someone that had a question that he wanted to know, and now I do, what the exit strategy would be if Connolly decides for whatever endeavor that they don't wanna do this anymore or can't do this anymore. Is there an exit strategy and plan in place so that we aren't just left, because it could happen, right?
Well, I guess here's the thought. The only item that would cause a need for an exit strategy would be some type of outside stimulus, such as dramatic reduction in reimbursement, dramatic reduction in availability. Those are the types of things that would cause Conley to even begin to consider the need for an exit strategy. Here's my point, and I want to make sure that both of these points are firmly put together, because it's not one statement, it's both statements. Those same pressures would be disastrous to each of the 4 individual services. If Conley was put in the position that it needed to exit this 5 years, 10 years down the road, our ability to weather a storm is far greater than the small services that currently exist. So I guess what I'm answering your question with is, in terms of an exit strategy, the elected hospital board, with the support of the judge and others, wants to see a countywide service come together for the care of the residents. That is the #1 thing, making sure that we don't have a repeat of what happened in Stockdale. I mean, that was a terrible time. I wasn't here, but I know you guys had to work your way through that, a very difficult time. So the board, our board, is on record as saying we want to be Wilson County's healthcare provider. We've grown from being Floresville's hospital. We've opened clinics. Making sure that the good EMS services is available is another portion of being the county's healthcare provider. The only thing that would cause the need for an exit strategy would be the same types of pressures that, if we didn't do this strategy, would really be very hard for each of the services to overcome. So I guess that's my answer to that.
I understand that, but In a typical situation, there'll be a feasibility study, a strategic plan, and an exit strategy written out. Do you have any, I mean, will there be something like that? Just,
The chair of our strategic planning committee, which is Mr. Eckel, was very clear that we're getting into this, we're starting this effort for the long haul. We're not looking to do this with the idea that there's some 3-year or 5-year end in mind. So I guess that's kind of my answer. I don't know that I'm suggesting that there isn't an exit strategy. There may be the need for one, but the intention of where we are today is definitely a long-term plan, and I don't know how to say that any other way than that's the intention of the board.
Jason?
Mr. Burns, I thank you for coming.
Appreciate it.
I appreciate all this information, not only as an employee, but also a citizen. I do have one question that relates to her.
Okay.
This exit strategy, I just recently came back from some training for EMS Chiefs Academy, and I had a one-on-one meeting with the state EMS director. And another department in this county recently had a merger. And one of the things that he asked us, even though it's a government entity, we told him we don't have an exit strategy. And he says, you have to. You have to have some sort of plan if this does not go well, or if some other department came in and merged or took over. And this was something that was new to us. There was a lot of stuff that we learned at this class that was very recent changes that we no longer had the idea, understanding of. And it was something that caught us off guard. So when we came back, we had to reevaluate that completely. How are we going to disperse funding? As a government entity, you can't just turn around and go to the board, can't give it to the employees. How do you give it back to the citizens, basically? So it's something that we actually had to research and look into. I agree with you that if this takes place, it should be long-term. You know, it should be something that progresses slowly over 5, 10, 20 years, and hopefully indefinitely. Question is, what if?
Sure.
What if something happens? So it's kind of in agreement with her. You know, I get that we're in it for the long run, but what if something does happen? We never would have thought Stockdale EMS would have closed, or, to be honest, when these ESDs were formed, that was a solution for the countywide. If you need funding and you need paid employees, then start an ESD. More and more departments across the county started to do that, and it's been working, and then now here we are talking about another merger, which is, again, in its own way, an exit strategy for ESD 3, ESD 2, Lavernia, Floresville. I mean, it's an exit strategy for everybody across the board, which we never would have thought of as volunteers, as employees, as citizens.
Sure. So I think your point's well made. Here's, I am hopeful that this does not appear cavalier, because I do not mean it cavalier at all. I think that I'm learning as we're going through this process that we have some really good minds involved in all of this. There are some smart people that have provided some leadership, that have asked good questions, that have had thoughts about what would work, what wouldn't work. And I guess my thought process is, kind of the way I solve problems, is when we are stuck with an issue, I get my team together, we talk about it, and we figure out what's going to make the most sense to go. So I'm challenged with the idea of, I'm trying to pull this together today. I'm trying to say, hey, how can we do this better for the county? And I'm challenged with also thinking about, how do I unwind it, you know, in year 3. I'm challenged with that, but my answer is, what I've seen in this process is there are smart people who could help us figure that out as we go.
Okay.
So that's my short answer. I appreciate your comment.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
I'm definitely in favor of a countywide EMS district, and I have been for some time, even before this district was formed. My thought was that we needed a countywide one. But at this point, it seems to me like cart has gotten in front of the horse, and that you should have been here months ago organizing this with these folks, and when you're here now, you should have something more concrete to bring them than promises, and that's all I see right now is, well, we're gonna do this, and it's gonna be great, and it's gonna be wonderful, but I don't see anything concrete.